Hello my dears, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be making this beautiful houndstooth suit from the 1940s. Alright my dears, today we are going to be working on Simplicity 4548. This is the pattern that was voted on the community tab of my page here on YouTube. And while I did intend on having this completed in October, unfortunately, life got in the way and things got delayed. In fact, all of October ended up being a pretty crazy storm at our house. We ended up getting to have family come in from out of town whom we hadn't seen in quite a few years, and that was really wonderful and special. But that also meant we had quite a bit of preparing to do before their arrival. And then, of course, we had just regular life stuff after. We had school and, yes, Halloween. And while I didn't have a very cute couple's costume, we did make do. And we did do quite a bit of trick-or-treating with my littles. So today I would like to just dive right back in. I apologize for my absence from the channel, but I hope you all understand, as I know all of us experience things in our lives from time to time which delay our ability to do some of our other things, like our wonderful hobbies, getting into our sewing rooms and our crafting rooms. So today our pattern 4548, the pattern, the suit on the right here, is actually shown in a beautiful houndstooth. And this is a pattern that I got as part of an eBay auction. And I actually did the unboxing here on the channel with you all. And I actually had a couple of commenters and a couple of messages saying, please, please, please make this pattern. And so it did go up on the channel as an option and you all voted on it. So thank you for that. As a lucky turn of fate, I also found this beautiful houndstooth fabric. It is blue and gray and white. And I found this at Art Parts in Boulder here in Colorado. And I will link them down in the description down below. Again, if anybody is in town and they'd like to visit that shop, it's a really great place to find secondhand art supplies, fabrics, patterns, picture frames, all sorts of goodies. It keeps those things out of the landfill and gives them a second chance at life. I was very, very excited to get this fabric, and I got it for a slam and steal. So I'm very excited to get started on this project with you all. And so without further ado, and without me chatting too much, I thought we would just dive right in. Now, I do have all of the pieces cut out because, if I'm honest, I was able to get this fabric, but it was in two different pieces, and I wasn't really sure if I was going to be able to make it work. And it took a little bit of fiddling and a little bit of finagling. And in fact, this is all I have left. This is the scraps. That's it. So I really did use every inch of this material to get it done, which is actually kind of great because it means I'm not going to be wasting anything, or very little for that matter, which I always like. I always like when things really are kind of clean cut out and I don't have yards and yards of extra fabric that I'm not going to use. So in our instructions, we're going to break these out right away because this is a slightly more complicated pattern than some of the more recent ones we've done. We've done a couple of blouses and a couple of skirts, and they've been lovely. But this is going to be the full suit, the whole kit and caboodle. Beautiful blazer, and of course this lovely skirt that has the deep inset pleat on the front. Very similar to that skirt that we made last year, the gray skirt that we made as part of our All Creatures Great and Small outfit. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. The instructions for this particular pattern are pretty decent. It's a full sheet. It's not just that half sheet, which for the 1940s, honestly, I feel like this is pretty good. I do feel like it's very, very common during this time period to find those little half sheets of instructions because they were being more conscious about how much they were using in resources. Everything kind of became slimmed down as they were moving towards the war effort. So to get a nice big sheet like this is really pretty lovely. It does have things broken down, has you putting together the skirt first and then moving on to the jacket. And as much as we can, we will follow the instructions, and then we'll see if we end up deviating, as we usually do, from any of the parts here, based just on what can make sense to us in our minds as we are working, as well as working with what we have for resources. And I'm excited to get started. So let's go ahead and get eye on these instructions and see what they'd like us to do first.
First, let's go ahead and take a look at the pieces that we are going to be using for this pattern. It has actually a 4-piece skirt, so there are 4 full panels that are cut out. We've got the skirt back, skirt side front, and then the front panel. The blazer has the front and back. Now the back is cut on a fold. Obviously the front cannot be. And then we do also have this facing for the front of the blazer, and that's going to allow these areas here for the collar to kind of fold out and come forward. We have the upper collar and under collar. There is an optional pocket. You can see an upper pocket and a lower pocket. Here on this particular one, the houndstooth pattern, we have just the pocket flap showing, and then the pocket itself is an inside pocket, so it's not a top stitched pocket as it is over here on this khaki colored suit. This is the style that I'm going to be aiming for. Instead of putting the top pocket on, I think I would like to go ahead and have an interior pocket. It'll be, I think, a new challenge for me. I'm not sure I've done an interior pocket quite like this before, so I'm excited to tackle that. And you can see that flat piece right here. And then of course the simple waistband and the sleeve. This is a standard sleeve. So these are the pieces that we're going to be looking at for this particular pattern. As for the instructions, it's wanting us to go ahead and start by putting the skirt together before moving on to the blazer. Now the skirt, it wants to go ahead and have us join the front to side front, matching up the notches, and then creasing open the top stitching on each side seam. Then we're going to be pleating from the inside in order to create this pleat here. So this one is going to have to be moving inward, and we can see that here. They've shown us how this is all stitched together, and then we're pulling this out. So this is the inside of the skirt to stitch down this line to create this interior pleat. Then when it's flipped outside, right side out, then we can go ahead and reinforce that on the front with some top stitching. So let's go ahead and get our skirt put together with our panels placed together, all of our seams either bound or flat ironed out to make everything nice and clean, and then go ahead and get this front pleat into place. All right, my dears, I wanted to check back in with you. I have the front pieces put together and the back panel pieces of the skirt put together, and I was just about to connect everything. As you can see, they've got the entire skirt connected here. However, I decided to stop and wait just a moment because they do want us to top stitch down all of the seams. In particular, they're wanting us to top stitch down the front of this front pleat. This is going to, of course, keep this pleat nicely in place. It's going to keep the fabric behind it that's creating the pleat into a nice shape in the skirt while you're wearing the skirt. And that's going to be really important for the overall look of the pattern as the way they've got it drawn here. But as you can see, even in the instructions, they're wanting us to top stitch every single seam in this skirt. And they're showing us that here too. We can see the top stitching on the side seams here, as well as on the front seams. So instead of attaching the entire thing and then fighting with the entire skirt as I try to get it through the machine, I'm going to go ahead, iron and top stitch all of my seams for the front, iron and top stitch all of my seams for the back, and then put the back and front panels together. That way I'm only having to really fight with all of the fabric for top stitching 2 of the seams, especially because this is a 4-panel skirt. All right, my dears, and it is at this point of my filming that the cord on my lapel mic broke. Now, I did get a replacement for it, and so later on in this video I am able to use it, but for right now, let's go ahead and talk about what Silent Me is trying to tell you on the screen. First, I'm letting you know that I was going to be applying the side placket for the fasteners to attach for the side fastening, such as hook and eyes. And then we're talking about stitching the waistband on. For this particular skirt, I did my measurement and then cut out the waistband to fit. I did go ahead and iron the waistband over to create a nice, clean, and firm line at the top. Then I went ahead and stitched that to the outer portion of the skirt, slipped the interfacing into it, and then went ahead and hand stitched the interior in order to hide all of my raw edges and keep everything nice and clean. So let's go ahead and do a bit of a montage, and we'll meet back to chat again in a minute. All right, my dears, let's check in on where we are at with this beautiful victory suit. I have gone ahead and finished the skirt here, and let's talk about a couple of different things that I have done, some changes I have made to the pattern itself in order to make it accommodate me. So for this was a 4-piece paneled skirt, and I did a couple of test fits throughout the process when I was getting the front pieces put together. Before I went ahead and did the top stitching as well, I made sure to do those test fits because not only is ripping seams terrible, but if you have top stitched a seam, that's twice as much ripping that you have to do. So I really did want to go ahead and make sure that this was on track throughout the process. And it seemed like it was going pretty well. Then I got to putting the waistband on, which I knew was at the proper waist measurement for me. And the top of the skirt was too big, despite multiple kind of test fits and checks. And I tried to ease the skirt into the waistband, and it was making it very lumpy and bumpy and really unappealing. And I really didn't want to tear out all of these top seams in order to nip everything in. So I did go ahead and make a change, and that change was I added darts. And I added quite a few. So this front panel, I've added a dart here and a dart here. And then to the back, I have actually added 4 darts. A dart here, 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 and here. They are very small darts, but it is just enough to allow this hip and bottom portion of the skirt to remain as it is, which fits me very well in the hip and bottom area, but to then nip in toward the waist. Here at the back and then here on the sides as well, in order to ensure that this has a nice smooth lay and a nice fit for me. So I did go ahead and do that. The other thing that I changed was this was supposed to be done with side fastenings such as hook and eyes, and I did go ahead and put the interfacing on, and I flipped it, and I was getting everything ready. And during one of the test fits, I really felt like it was kind of bulging on the side and really looked very unattractive because this is a fairly thick fabric. And so even though it wasn't necessarily the common choice at the time, I did go ahead and put a side zipper in because I had an invisible zipper that I could add in, and I thought it would just give it a much cleaner look and a much nicer lay, and that's important to me. I did leave the hook and eye up here at the top of the waistband. And so that's an easy, just slide it on, clip that hook, and then you can zip up the side and you're on your way. All of the interior seams here have all been top stitched and or flipped and stitched in order to make sure that they're not going to fray. So that is nice and clean. And then I did go ahead after applying the waistband and then sliding the interfacing into it. I rolled everything over and I hand stitched the inside. And I did that so that all of the raw edges for the waistband will be tucked in and nice and clean. And now, before we move on to the jacket of this pattern, I wanted to address perhaps the elephant in the room. And that is something I've gotten in comments before, and something I, as a sewist, have said to others in the past, which is, you wouldn't have had to go back and make all of these changes if you had just done a mock-up. So let's talk about why I didn't make a mock-up and why here on this channel you regularly see me make a pattern without making a mock-up. If I have a pattern that is going to be for a big event, if I'm going to be spending a lot of money on the fabric, there's a very good chance I'm going to be doing a mock-up. If I'm going to be making something for someone else, if I'm going to be drafting a pattern, I absolutely am going to make a mock-up. But for everyday regular patterns, the truth is I don't generally have the time or the resources to make a mock-up for every single garment that I make for myself. Many times I get these fabrics on clearance, I get them at secondhand stores, etc. And so I'm already using something that I know, even if it doesn't come out quite perfect, it can come out pretty perfect for me. The other reason that I don't necessarily do all of these mock-ups and then come to you all with a finished pattern that has been tweaked for me is because I don't think that's realistic for most people. And I really don't think it's realistic for the time when many of these patterns would have been made. The 1930s, 40s, 50s, even 60s, many of these sewists who are going to be working from home aren't likely to have an excessive amount of extra fabric or extra income to spend on extra fabric to make mock-ups. It's true they might have an old tablecloth or an old set of curtains that they could use once in a while for something that was really special, but on the whole, for the most part, we're likely going to be seeing that they're picking up these patterns and making them, and then figuring out the small fit issues that they need to along the way to make the garment fit them, because they wouldn't have had necessarily a ton of time, just like I don't. I work 2 jobs, I've got a family, and then I love coming and hanging out with you all here. And they also wouldn't have had, like I said, those extras. So I want to work through these patterns with you all, even with the bumps in the road, to show you, yeah, sometimes these patterns don't work out and we have to make small modifications like adding darts to a skirt where darts are not already in the pattern in order to make them fit me. And I think that's okay. So if you're out there and you are sewing, you're new to sewing especially, and you think, goodness, I see a lot of creators out there, I see a lot of sewists out there, and every pattern they do, they make a mock-up first, and I don't have the resources to do that. It's okay. It's okay. Go ahead and pick the pattern that you like. Do your measurements as best you can and tackle the pattern. And when you hit a bump in the road, take a deep breath and find a solution. We can almost always find a solution to make it fit. So that is why I don't always make mock-ups, and in fact, most of the time here on the channel, I don't make mock-ups. I want you to see when I have struggles, and I want you to see that I do something in order to fix the problem so that it can become a wearable, beautiful garment without having to scrap it and without having to spend a whole lot of extra money. Without further ado, let's set our skirt aside and start working on this beautiful jacket. Now, I did mention as well, this is woven, this is not a print, so this, just like with our last fabric, it can be difficult sometimes to tell the front from the back. So I'm going to take my handy dandy chalk pencil and I am marking big X's on the inside of the fabric to make sure I don't have any oopsies where I accidentally stitch the front of one to the back of another. So you're going to see me marking quite a few of the pieces here just to make sure I don't have any oopsies. We are also going to be marking our darts for the jacket. This is a beautifully fitted jacket. We are going to go ahead and do a fisheye dart in the front. We're going to do a shoulder seam dart in the front, and all of that is going to allow it to have a beautiful bust shaping and beautiful waist shaping. So let's get marking and then get stitching. All right, my dears, we're going to move on to putting the darts into the back of the jacket, matching the same as the front. We are going to go ahead and be adding a fisheye dart across the back as well as a shoulder seam dart. They are a little bit more narrow than the front of the jacket because we're really just kind of creating some nice back shaping so that the shoulder blades can have movement. So a little bit of an action back. Not a firm one. It doesn't have an extra pleat in the back for movement, but we are going to go ahead and just shape the shoulder area. And then again, that fisheye dart is going to be tucking in around the back waist here to create that nice shaping at the waistline. So I'm going to mark that. And then after we get that done, it does want us to go ahead and sew the 2 back panels together because this does have a little bit of shaping through the back panel as well. So let's get those marked out so we can move on to pockets. But first, more darts. All right, my dears, let's go ahead and give this pocket a try. We have our instructions here. we are supposed to have our tab completely finished and flipped, which I have done here. And then we're going to be placing the pocket bag on the outside. We're going to be stitching this little rectangle here and then slicing into it in order to push the pocket into the coat. Once it's turned to the inside, then you go ahead and stitch the other pocket bag to it. The other thing that we need to check is that we are putting the pocket tab and we're sandwiching it between the pocket bag and the jacket. So we are layering those, and that's going to pull everything inside of the jacket, tuck it in, and keep it nice and clean. So let's take a look at that. I've already marked out here on my jacket with my pen. Ignore this mark right here. I've already marked out here. So I just need to go ahead and copy those down to this pocket bag here. Okay. Now with my correct side facing up, halfway down my marks, just like that. And then I'm going to be lining up these marks here. Good. Then I'm going to be sewing to the outsides of the pocket tab. And I'm actually going to try to cut this in fairly close here. I don't want the hole for the pocket to stick out past the tabs. But now we can see I've got this tucked in and sandwiched in here nicely. This pocket bag seems extra wide. I did cut it a little bit wider than the original, and that was because I didn't have enough space on the sides to pull it in. And I just figured it was better to have a little too much. We can trim the pocket bag down. That's better than not having enough material and finding ourselves in a little bit of a pickle because of that. All right, moment of truth, my dears. We have our rectangle sewn here. We have everything secured in place. Now we just need to cut this open and hope like the dickens that we've done it properly. All right, there I have all my tabs. And in theory, we should be able to just stuff this inside, pulling the tab down. Give this a good tug to the insides. Just like that. I think in order to really make everything work nicely, we need to go ahead and head over to the iron and go ahead and press this out. I may have to try and get a little closer in on these edges. I was a little bit hesitant. I didn't want to go too hard. So let me give this a firm pressing and we'll take a look. All right, my dears, and there it is. We have it. We have our pocket flap with our opening underneath. I have pressed everything out and given it a couple of really good tugs. There's like these little kind of folds here, but it's not translating out onto the outer part of the jacket, so I'm going to be okay with that. The next thing we need to do is to go ahead and attach the inner pocket bag. And then once we've sewn along here and maybe rolled and kind of tucked this edge in here by hand, we'll have this really nice little inset pocket in the front of our jacket. All right, my dears, let's take a little bit of a look here together. You can see we have our facing piece and the upper collar. That is going to be this upper collar piece.
we're going to be stitching these two pieces together completely independently of the blazer, and we're going to be folding everything down and clipping edges, and we're going to be preparing it to go on to the blazer itself. But before we can do this, we are going to need something for this upper collar to attach to in order to ensure that all of these raw edges become tucked in and beautiful and hidden. And so we are going to need to be attaching the under collar, which is this here. So we're going to be attaching it onto it. You can see it here as well. It's already just sitting here hanging out, and that is going to allow us to attach this to the blazer itself. So let's go ahead, get this seamed up. This is supposed to be stitched. It should line up with the back of the blazer and get it sewn into place. And then we're going to go ahead and attach these two pieces together, get everything firmly pressed and clipped. And at that point, we'll meet back and we'll take a look at how we're going to be putting it onto the actual blazer so that it can be flipped.
All right, we officially have our facing and upper collar put together, our under collar on our blazer. And so now it is time to get these two put together and hope like the dickens that we put these two pieces together properly and matched up all of our notches correctly. So I'm going to take our blazer and flip it so that the right side is facing me. And then I'm going to take our facing and upper collar with the seams facing me, so right sides together, because we're going to then flip everything inside and start lining everything up, and hopefully we've done our job with all of our proper seam allowances. And it looks like we'll be good. So I am going to get to pinning. Now, what we are going to do, I'll walk us through it. We're going to start at the bottom. So around this little bottom piece, all the way up to our two beautiful notches in our lapel, across the top collar, down the other side, and around to the bottom. Okay, so one long, beautiful seam. Okay, we're not breaking anything up. That's going to allow this entire piece to be put together beautifully and flipped beautifully. So pin, pin, pin. If you don't like using pins, clip, clip, clip. But make sure everything stays nice and lined up because you're starting at this bottom piece, and if you don't have everything really snug and in place, by the time you get up here, you could find that everything has shifted. If you absolutely hate pins and you absolutely hate clips and you are concerned, of course, you can always just go ahead and baste this into place by hand in alternating color thread, and then you can get that really nice tight stitch in and then pull that whip stitch out later, or that basting stitch, excuse me, the basting stitch out later. So your preference, but get this really snug in place before you get to the sewing machine. All right, my dears, we have the entire front part of this blazer put together. I have done the top stitching all along the exterior, so we've got these beautiful lapels really firm in place, as well as along the bottom. I have the entire base hem completely put into place, and I have all of the interior part of the facing and the back collar hand stitched into place, which means all we need to do now is get our sleeves on. So we are going to go ahead and get out our beautiful bell-shaped sleeve, get them first pinned to make our tube, and then we're going to get that fit into the side of our blazer. After that, it's buttons, and we are ready to show this beautiful victory suit off. So let's get these sleeves and our buttons stitched in place. All right, my dears, that's it for this week and this beautiful 1940s victory suit. I am absolutely thrilled with how things came out. Thank you all so much for voting on this pattern and giving me the opportunity to make it. I also really love how it ended up pairing with this vintage hat that I found on auction, and I'm really excited to have the whole set in my closet and into my everyday wardrobe. A couple of things about this week's make. I am absolutely thrilled with this particular suit as it is, pairing it together, but I think something amazing that happened that was unintentional but a really lovely outcome is that in making this suit and making it in what I now realize are kind of my signature colors of blue, gray, and ivory, I ended up making something that matches many of the other pieces in my wardrobe that I have made, and as a result, I've kind of built myself a capsule wardrobe. By adding this suit, I've really combined many of the pieces I already have into what could easily be a full wardrobe. I can pair this blazer, of course, with a beautiful light blue blouse or an ivory blouse as I'm wearing today, and I can pair it with the skirt that is made to match it, a pair of trousers that I made 2 years ago, or the gray skirt that we all made together last year. I can wear the skirt on its own with any of my blouses, my ivory or my light blue blouses. I can also pair it with the sweater vest that we knit earlier, about 1.5 years ago now. And for that matter, I can pair the entire suit with that beautiful sweater vest as well if the weather is particularly chilly and I don't want to have a big coat over the top. Of course, I can add those wonderful layers and stay nice and cozy and warm and very, very period appropriate. So I'm very excited about how this ended up working in the wardrobe that I already have, and I really think that the fit overall came out really nicely. I think it came out exactly as it was intended, and I do think that's pretty spectacular when it comes to patterns. Many times how it looks in the drawing versus how things really kind of end up for us can have a little bit of a stray. They can stray from the path, but really this one came out very much like it is shown in the actual drawing on the front of the pattern, and it turned out to match the victory suits I have seen online and the ones that other people have found that are true vintage. Now, of course, the pattern itself is true vintage and that does help a lot, but I know that sometimes when we are recreating and we are building new things, even with old patterns, sometimes they don't quite line up with the originals, and I'm happy to say I feel like this particular suit ended up doing a very good job of looking the way it's supposed to look. We did make a few small alterations to the pattern, nothing major. Mostly, actually, we just tucked in the waist of the skirt a little bit more by adding darts. I added 2 darts along the front and 4 small darts along the back of the skirt, and that allowed things to kind of nip in a little bit further at the waist while allowing the hip and thigh area of the skirt to remain true to the original pattern, and that just helped it to fit me a little bit better. It did not impact the overall design, nor do I think it impacted how it is supposed to look or fit underneath the blazer or with other items. So I think that was great. The other thing that I did do is that I put a zipper in the side. That is not according to the pattern at all, and I'm not really sure if there would have been zippers in any of these suits from the 1940s. If you're watching and you know, you can give me an answer. Please write it in the description down below. But I did originally follow the exact instructions in the pattern, and I created the placket that overlaps in order to use hook and eyes to close the side. And because of the thickness of this fabric, because it is quite thick houndstooth material, it created a very, very bulky closure on the side hip, which I didn't like because it made the 2 sides unequal and it created a bulge underneath the blazer that I thought didn't look good. So I took that placket out completely and I put an invisible zipper in, and I'm very glad I did, even though that is a little bit of a stray from the original, and it's not something I'm sure would be in an original suit from the 1940s. I'm still very happy that I did it, and I think it's what's best for me. So thank you all so very much for joining me today and joining me throughout this whole week of making this beautiful suit from 1942. If you like vintage patterns, if you like sewing, and if you like costuming, please hit that like and subscribe button down below. I would love to have you along with me on my journey. Thank you guys so much. Bye.